The mission that worked. July 10, 1943. Just before dawn. Outside Gela, Sicily. The sea is black and restless, slapping against the rubber hull of a small assault craft as it drifts toward shore. Salt spray clings to the faces of the men crouched low inside, mixing with sweat and oil. Lieutenant Colonel William Darby grips the side rope with one hand, the other resting near the butt of his M1 carbine. He does not look at the horizon. He looks at the shoreline, where darkness hides cliffs, machine guns, and men who do not yet know they are about to lose them. You can hear breathing. Not fear exactly. Focus. The sound of men counting seconds in their heads. Darby's Rangers have trained for this moment across North Africa and Scotland. They have rehearsed night landings, cliff assaults, silent kills. They are not here to fight a battle. They are here to open a door. Take the heights. Knock out the coastal guns. Let the invasion pour through. The craft grounds softly. Boots hit water. Then sand. Then rock. No shouting. No whistles. The Rangers move as one, shadows slipping inland, rifles slung, Thompson submachine guns tied to chests. Ahead, the Italian coastal battery sits silent, its guns pointed uselessly out to sea. The assault is brief and brutal. A sentry turns too late. A Ranger lunges, knife flashing once. Another gun pit is taken with grenades rolled low and fast. Within minutes, the battery is neutralized. The cliffs belong to Darby's men. At 0445 hours, Darby signals success. From a tactical standpoint, the mission is flawless. Below them, the Allied invasion fleet moves closer, confident now that one of its most dangerous obstacles has been removed. Naval officers watching the shoreline mark the battery as destroyed. The landing at Gela proceeds with fewer losses because of what happened here, in the dark, by men who will never be named in official communiques. By sunrise, the Rangers are dug in, scanning inland. They have done exactly what they were ordered to do. And already, the seeds of failure are being planted. Because while Darby's men fight for terrain measured in meters and minutes, the war above them is being shaped by decisions measured in headlines, alliances, and promises made months before boots ever touched Sicilian sand. Within hours, German counterattacks begin. Panzer units probe the beaches. Luftwaffe aircraft streak overhead, strafing landing craft. The Rangers hold their ground, repelling infantry assaults with disciplined fire. They call in naval gunfire with precision, shells screaming overhead and slamming into advancing columns. Again, tactically, everything works. By the end of the day, the Rangers have beaten back multiple attacks. They have inflicted heavy casualties. They have proven, once more, that small, well-trained units can dominate larger conventional forces when used correctly. Reports flow up the chain of command praising their performance. Darby is cited for leadership. The Rangers are cited for courage. But no one asks the harder question. What happens after the door is opened? Because the invasion of Sicily is not meant to win the war. It is meant to send a message. To Italy. To Germany. To Stalin. To Roosevelt's voters. And that message is already becoming tangled in politics the Rangers will never see. Italian morale collapses faster than expected. Mussolini will be overthrown within weeks. On paper, this looks like strategic success. But Germany responds not by retreating, but by reinforcing. Elite divisions flood into Italy. The peninsula becomes a fortress, every mountain ridge a killing ground. The war that follows will grind for nearly 2 years. And the Rangers, despite their early success, will pay for decisions they did not make. Days after Gela, Darby's men are ordered forward again. Not for raids. Not for sabotage. For frontal assaults against prepared positions. Missions that ignore everything that made them effective. They attacked Cisterna in January 1944, sent against German paratroopers without adequate intelligence or armor support. Nearly the entire Ranger force is destroyed. The men who took the cliffs at Gela are killed or captured in a matter of hours. On the ground, soldiers will later say the operation was necessary. That risks had to be taken. that sacrifices were unavoidable. And perhaps, at the level of maps and conferences, that is true. But standing where Derby once stood, overlooking the Sicilian coast, the truth is simpler and harsher. The mission succeeded. The war did not. This is the reality of special operations in the Second World War. Small units achieving precise, deadly objectives, only to be swallowed by strategies shaped far from the battlefield. Their victories bought time, opened paths, created opportunities. But they could not control what those opportunities were used for. And in that gap between tactical brilliance and strategic failure, entire units were lost. Victories without direction. September 9, 1943. Salerno, Italy. The night air smells of cordite and wet earth. Waves crash harder here than they did in Sicily, throwing spray over helmets as men struggle ashore under fire. The German response is faster this time. Sharper. More deliberate. They have learned. Captain Roy Murray's Ranger platoon advances through olive groves lit by burning vehicles, the glow reflecting off steel helmets and the white trunks of shattered trees. The Germans are not retreating inland. They are counterattacking immediately, driving toward the beaches with armor and artillery. Once again, the small units perform exactly as trained. Rangers infiltrate flanks. They seize high ground. They mark targets for naval guns. At Chunsi Pass, a narrow mountain road becomes the key to the entire landing. If the Germans retake it, the beachhead collapses. Murray's men hold it for days, cut off, short of food and ammunition, fighting off repeated assaults. They win. By every measurable battlefield metric, they win. Yet the larger picture continues to drift out of alignment. Italy has surrendered. Politicians announce it as proof that the campaign is working. But German forces simply disarm Italian units and take their positions. The Allies now face the same enemy, on worse terrain, with stretched supply lines and no clear end state. For the men fighting on the ground, the objectives are increasingly vague. Take the ridge. Take the town. Take the river crossing. Each is accomplished at cost, and each reveals another fortified line beyond it. Special forces units like the Rangers were never designed for this kind of war. They were created to disrupt, to confuse, to strike where the enemy was weak. Instead, they are being fed into a conventional campaign driven by political necessity. Churchill wants Italy to bleed German divisions away from France. Roosevelt wants visible progress to justify the war to the public. Stalin wants proof that the Western Allies are carrying their share of the burden. None of those goals appear on Murray's map. Orders arrive late. Intelligence is incomplete. German units identified as exhausted turn out to be fresh. Roads marked as lightly defended are swept by machine guns and artillery. Still, the Rangers adapt. They always do. At Anzio, in January 1944, Allied planners hoped to break the stalemate with a bold landing behind German lines. The idea is sound. The execution is cautious. The beachhead is established, but instead of driving inland immediately, command hesitates. The Germans do not. They surround the perimeter with artillery. Shells fall day and night. Trenches fill with mud and blood. The Rangers conduct patrols into enemy territory, probing, ambushing, gathering intelligence. They succeed tactically again and again. But the strategic window closes. When the order finally comes to advance, it is too late. The Germans are ready. At Cistana, the Rangers are sent forward as if they were regular infantry, tasked with seizing a town held by elite paratroopers supported by armor. They move at night, as always. They believe surprise will carry them through. Instead, they walk into prepared kill zones. Machine guns open up from concealed positions. Mortars fall with terrifying accuracy. Radio calls for support go unanswered or arrive too late. Platoons are cut off, surrounded, annihilated. By dawn, the Ranger battalions have ceased to exist as fighting units. On paper, Cistana is a failed operation. In reality, it is the inevitable result of a pattern that has been repeating since Sicily. Tactical excellence being used to compensate for strategic indecision. Special forces were winning fights they were never meant to fight, in wars that were being shaped by priorities they could not influence. Each successful mission reinforced the belief that these units could be used anywhere, anytime, for anything. And each success masked the underlying problem. Winning battles does not equal winning wars. As spring approaches, the Italian campaign grinds on. Cassino becomes a symbol of stubborn resistance and mounting Allied casualties. Monasteries are bombed. Rivers are crossed and recrossed. Hills change hands multiple times. Men on the ground sense it before historians ever will. There is no coherent end state. The enemy is not collapsing. The terrain favors defense. Political pressure keeps pushing the front forward regardless of cost. And the tools designed for precision are being blunted by attrition. Special operations units are rebuilt, rebranded, reassigned. Lessons are learned, but slowly, and often only after disaster. New doctrines begin to form, quietly acknowledging what the Italian campaign has made painfully clear. A mission can be perfectly executed and still serve a failing strategy. And when that happens, the men who carried out the mission pay the price. When precision serves politics. June 6, 1944. 0130 hours. Near Saint-Côme-du-Mont, Normandy, France. The parachute snaps open with a violent jerk, yanking Captain William Colby backward in the night sky. Below him, the French countryside flashes briefly in moonlight. Hedgerows. Fields. Dark lines of roads already filling with German movement. He hits the ground hard, rolls, cuts free, and pulls himself into the shadows. Colby is not here to fight a battle. He is here to make one possible. As part of a Jedburgh team, his mission is simple on paper. Link up with the French resistance. Organize sabotage. Delay German reinforcements moving toward the beaches. Buy time for the invasion forces fighting their way inland. It is special operations at its most refined. The team carries 10 guns, pistols, radios wrapped carefully against moisture. They move in civilian clothes beneath their jump smocks. By dawn, they are already dispersed, hiding equipment, contacting local resistance leaders who have been waiting for this night for years. Rail lines are blown. Bridges collapse. Convoys are ambushed in narrow lanes where German armor cannot maneuver. Messages flow back to London, detailing enemy movements with precision no area reconnaissance could provide. From a tactical perspective, it is a masterpiece. German divisions are delayed. Units arrive piecemeal at the front. Some never arrive at all. The beaches at Utah and Omaha survive in part because of what men like Colby are doing far inland. But once again, success creates expectations. Resistance fighters push for more aggressive action. British and American planners request deeper strikes, larger operations, broader disruption. Jedburgh teams are asked to hold territory, to coordinate large-scale engagements with lightly armed partisans. This was never the design. In the Vaucluse Plateau, south of Normandy, French resistance leaders believe liberation is imminent. Allied radio broadcasts encourage them. Supplies are dropped. Plans are drawn up to create a liberated zone that will rise in open revolt. The Germans respond with overwhelming force. Mountain troops, armor, artillery, and aircraft descend on the plateau. Villages are burned. Fighters are executed. Civilians are massacred. The resistance is crushed. On Allied maps, the Vaucluse is marked as a setback. On the ground, it is a catastrophe. The men who encouraged the uprising did not intend for it to fail. They believed momentum mattered. That visible resistance would accelerate liberation. That boldness would be rewarded. Instead, the disconnect between political messaging and military capability becomes lethal. Jedburgh teams across France continue to operate effectively. They ambush, sabotage, report. But they also watch as resistance units are sacrificed in operations driven as much by symbolism as by strategy. The invasion succeeds. Paris is liberated. France is free. But the cost is unevenly distributed. Special operations forces did their jobs. They delayed German movements. They amplified Allied strength. They multiplied the effect of conventional armies. What they could not do was control how their successes were interpreted. Each blown bridge became proof that more could be done. Each delayed column justified riskier uprisings. Each tactical win fed a strategic appetite that outpaced reality on the ground. By late summer, many Jedburgh teams are pulled back or reassigned. Their reports begin to reflect a quieter truth. That resistance must be coordinated carefully. That political encouragement without military backing invites disaster. The lesson is being learned, but slowly, and at a cost paid by others. Across occupied Europe, the pattern repeats. In Yugoslavia, support flows to partisan forces whose political goals do not align neatly with Allied plans. In Greece, resistance factions fight each other as much as the Germans. In Poland, the Warsaw Uprising is encouraged but not supported in time, leading to its destruction. Special operations can light fires. They cannot decide how they burn. And in every case, the men executing the missions understand the limits long before the men authorizing them do. They see it in the faces of civilians. In the desperation of fighters promised help that does not arrive. In the quiet after successful operations that change nothing at the strategic level. The war moves forward. The maps change color. The headlines speak of progress. But beneath it all, the same reality persists. Tactical brilliance does not substitute for strategic clarity. And when the two diverge, the burden falls on those closest to the ground. The cost paid by those who execute. December 16, 1944. The Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Snow muffles everything. Footsteps disappear almost as soon as they are made. Breath hangs in the air, freezing on wool collars and helmet straps. Somewhere ahead, German artillery fires, the dull thump rolling through the trees like distant thunder. Major Robert Cole crouches over a map illuminated by a hooded flashlight. He knows this terrain too well. Narrow roads. Dense woods. Limited visibility. Perfect for surprise. The Germans have launched a counteroffensive, punching through thinly held Allied lines. The response is immediate and desperate. Every available unit is rushed forward, including airborne and special operations forces pulled from roles they were never meant to abandon. The 101st Airborne is sent to Bastogne. Special reconnaissance teams are ordered to identify enemy spearheads and direct artillery. Some units are tasked with holding ground outright. Once again, precision assets are being used as blunt instruments. Small teams infiltrate behind German lines, radios crackling in the cold. They report armor movements, call in fire missions, guide counterattacks. They perform superbly under impossible conditions. But the strategic situation is reactive, not deliberate. Command decisions are driven by crisis. The goal is not to reshape the battlefield, but to stop it from collapsing. Tactical successes stack up. Bridges are held. Roads are denied. German advances are slowed. The offensive ultimately fails. History will remember the Battle of the Bulge as a German gamble that did not pay off, and an Allied victory achieved through resilience and sacrifice. What it will not emphasize is how many specialized units were burned in the process. Men trained for intelligence gathering, sabotage, and coordination are thrown into static defenses and frontal engagements. Losses are heavy. Institutional knowledge bleeds away with every casualty. The same pattern plays out across theaters. In Burma, British Chindets penetrate deep behind Japanese lines, conducting long-range operations that demonstrate extraordinary endurance and skill. They disrupt supply lines and tie down enemy forces. But their missions are expanded beyond sustainability. They are ordered to hold positions, to support conventional advances that do not materialize in time. Disease and attrition kill more men than combat. The tactical achievements are undeniable. The strategic payoff is ambiguous. Commanders praise the courage and ingenuity of these forces while quietly acknowledging that the cost was disproportionate to the results achieved. Political pressure demands visible action. Special operations provide it. They create headlines. They produce dramatic narratives. They offer the illusion of control. For the men executing the missions, the illusion is thin. They see how quickly a successful raid becomes justification for a riskier one. How a breakthrough leads to expectations of permanence. How a unit designed to strike and vanish is asked to hold ground against superior forces. By late 1944, doctrine begins to shift, informed by hard experience. Special operations are increasingly integrated into broader plans rather than used as substitutes for them. Intelligence is centralized. Coordination improves. But these lessons arrive late in the war. Too late for the Rangers at Cisterna. Too late for resistance fighters in the Vacas. Too late for many Chindets buried in jungle graves. The war will be won. Germany will surrender. Japan will follow. But victory will be claimed by nations, not by the small units whose successes were often consumed without lasting effect. As the fighting moves toward its end, a quieter reckoning begins among those who planned and those who fought. Reports are written. After action reviews are filed. New manuals take shape. They all circle the same conclusion. Special forces are force multipliers, not replacements for strategy. Used correctly, they can change the course of a campaign. Used carelessly, they simply increase the cost of failure. And in the Second World War, that lesson was learned the hard way. Victory claimed, lessons learned. May 7, 1945. Reims, France. The room is quiet except for the scratch of pens and the rustle of paper. German officers sit stiffly at a long table, faces hollow, uniforms worn thin by years of retreat. Across from them, Allied representatives watch in silence as signatures are placed on documents that formally end the war in Europe. Outside, church bells begin to ring. For most of the world, this is the moment that matters. The proof that sacrifice led to victory. That suffering had purpose. That the war, at last, makes sense. But far from Reims, in hospitals, depots, and temporary camps, men who fought the war differently received the news without celebration. Some are missing units that no longer exist. Some carry injuries that will never fully heal. Some are alive only because they were reassigned before the next impossible mission came down the chain of command. They remember successes that never appeared in headlines. Operations that worked exactly as planned, only to be rendered irrelevant by decisions made elsewhere. In Sicily, Italy, France, the Ardennes, Burma, and beyond, special operations forces repeatedly demonstrated what disciplined, highly trained units could accomplish. They seized critical terrain. They disrupted enemy logistics. They gathered intelligence that shaped entire campaigns. They won missions. What they could not do was guarantee that those missions fit into a coherent path to victory. As the war ends, senior officers begin to speak more openly. In lectures at staff colleges. In classified reports. In conversations that will later shape doctrine. They acknowledge that tactical brilliance was often used to mask strategic uncertainty. That special forces were sometimes deployed not because they were the right tool, but because they were the only tool that could act quickly enough to satisfy political urgency. The war demanded action. Special forces delivered it. But action is not the same as direction. In the Pacific, similar conclusions are reached. Raiders, scouts, and reconnaissance teams performed feats of endurance and courage, often deep behind enemy lines. Yet island hopping, logistics, and industrial output ultimately decided the war. The small units made the fight possible. They did not decide how it ended. After 1945, new organizations are formed. New doctrines emphasize integration, clarity of purpose, and realistic objectives. Special operations are defined not by what they can do, but by when and why they should be used. The lessons are written in the blood of those who paid for their absence. For the men who lived through it, the memory is more personal. They remember standing on ground they had taken at great cost, only to be ordered forward again without rest or reinforcement. They remember being praised for adaptability, then punished for success by being given harder, riskier tasks. They remember realizing, often too late, that no amount of battlefield excellence could compensate for a flawed strategy. Winning the mission felt immediate, tangible, earned. Losing the war, or prolonging it unnecessarily, felt abstract, invisible. decided in rooms they would never enter. And yet, history depends on both. The Second World War was won not just by courage or skill, but by alignment between action and purpose. Where that alignment existed, progress followed. Where it did not, victory was delayed and lives were spent without lasting gain. Special forces reveal that truth more clearly than most. Their story is not one of failure, but of warning. A reminder that wars are not won by missions alone. That even perfect execution cannot redeem a strategy without direction. And that the greatest burden of that disconnect is carried by those asked to act first and question later. When the bells stop ringing and the papers yellow with age, that lesson remains. Winning the mission is never enough.